Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my co-host, Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. Got another guest on, longtime friend, former foe for a few years. Awesome dude. But I'll kick it over to you for the intro here.
I think I just broke a streak of like 185 episodes of saying great. How are you? I just said wonderful for the first time ever. But I think I said wonderful because I'm fired up for our guest tonight, who this might cause a little bit of controversy, but arguably my favorite member of this baseball family. But tonight we're joined by the head coach at Johnson & Wales, Kevin Casey, who enters into his 7th year at Johnson & Wales. I can't believe it's 7 years. That's wild. But also, done a great job there. They won 3 straight championships in the GNAC, the Great Northeast Athletic Conference. But tonight we're joined by my personal favorite Casey, Kevin Casey. Kev, welcome to the podcast, man. Thanks for joining us.
Les, I appreciate that intro. That's big time, man. You got me all jacked up for this, and I appreciate your allegiance in the Casey family. I've always known that from day one. So I know where Andy is. He worked with the other one, so we'll leave it at that. You know what I mean? He hit it right. We were foes for a while. We've got over our differences now, and we're coming together. But Glass, you definitely made this happen, man. So I appreciate that.
Listen, I have been very upfront about my allegiance in the Casey family.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Generally speaking, when I talk to everyone, I'm like, listen, Kevin Casey, arguably the best, but my favorite. So that's where I draw a line in the sand there. It's not that I dislike the other ones. I love the family. But if we're ranking, and let's be honest, that might have happened in the Casey family, knowing the old man. You're number one in my book.
That's awesome, man. It tends to happen a lot. So,
as we get going here, just give our listeners a quick rundown of your career and how you got to Johnson & Wales, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Baseball is kind of in it from an early age for me, to be honest with you. I think you alluded to it. I kind of grew up in a baseball family, the son of a baseball coach. Kind of spent my years on the bench as a bat boy, and eventually grew up to play on that same team with my older brother, who's always at Coast Guard, and my old man, who's now my pitching coach after he retired at Tufts. But out of school, I got a great opportunity to coach at a small Division III school up in Nashua, New Hampshire that no longer exists today, unfortunately, but Daniel Webster College and at the time I worked for a guy named J.P. Pine. And what was awesome about that experience is it kind of allowed me to grow as a coach. I think I played for an established program at Tufts. It kind of going in certain ways. The locker room kind of ran itself. There were certain ways we did some things, and to take some of that out elsewhere, but also be able to mold myself a little bit and work with JP was an unbelievable experience. And we got to taste success right away, which was awesome there. Being able to turn that program around and go to 2 regionals. And then, after that experience, I got the opportunity to head back to Tufts and coach at my alma mater, which was an awesome experience. I think anytime you get the opportunity to coach where you played, it obviously means something to you. The place, the ins and outs. And I also got to work with, a Hall of Famer in Coach Case. So that was an unbelievable experience. After that, Coach Glavin took over the reins at Northeastern, and I got the opportunity to go over there and work with the hitters, work with the catchers at some point, and then work with the outfielders for the majority of my career. But that kind of gave me a taste of a little bit of the Division I baseball, developing the high school kids, trying to get them, ready for the highest level. A lot of player development focused stuff, and obviously working for a guy like Coach Glav. I mean, you can see what they're doing up in Boston. It's absolutely awesome. And to be a part of that and learn from those guys was an unbelievable experience. I made the decision to get married and start to have some kids, and the opportunity arose up in Providence at Johnson & Wales. As soon as I kind of went down there to do my visit, I kind of saw a little bit of a sleeping giant. And what really attracted me is just kind of the competitive nature that I've always had. It was a place that we could accomplish some firsts in school history. You had a very good program. But a program that had never been to an NCAA regional, never had won a conference championship yet. And that kind of tickled the competitive side of me. And I think I made the right decision when I went down there. It's hard to believe it's been 7 years. It's been kind of a crazy 7 years with the COVID years mixed into that. But, I've been very fortunate, and you know, I thought I was fortunate day one. There's not many head coaching opportunities throughout the country, and when you're entrusted in a position like that to make decisions for 35, 36 young guys, and try to lead them to success and help them realize their dreams, you know, it's a pretty special opportunity. And as I mentioned, you know, one of the coolest things was about a year later, we got to hire a Hall of Fame head coach in my old man down there and make it a little bit of a family affair down in Providence, which was pretty cool as well.
No, I mean you've been around the block. You've seen so much as a coach and as a player. Been around some of those guys that have had a ton of success. Like obviously your old man, you know, he's got about as many wins as anybody in the business. You know, JP, you know, he's the head coach at Amherst now. And then obviously Glav, like, you know, his baseball background is kind of speaks for itself. And you've been involved in a lot of places that have won, you know, and then you got Johnson Wales rolling now with this success you've had specifically the last 3 years. What do you guys look for? How does it look to identify players and recruit players that are going to keep that moving for you?
I think, as you mentioned, right, I think I was fortunate enough to work for guys that had winning programs, right? I think there's something to be said. There's a way that winners do things, and we try to keep it as simple as possible, right? I think if you had those coaches come down to our campus, they'd see all a little bit of what they do in their programs that we kind of stole down there. And I think it's the same thing from a recruiting standpoint. I don't think I've ever changed where we were at from a recruiting standpoint. I think I've always wanted, like most coaches, a great baseball player. And there's obviously plenty of opportunities now, more opportunities than when we started to be able to go chase those guys and be able to do that. Now, certain places I've gone, we've been stringent to academics, high academics. This is a little bit different now at Johnson & Wales, where we have kind of a wide variety that we can have to offer. But, you know, for us, it's as simple, man. I want a kid that loves the game. He's a good baseball player. He competes. I think most of the time when we're trying to make decisions in the recruiting process, it involves us seeing them in game. You know, I think we try to use showcase videos and all that to identify our talent. But then ultimately, I want to see what that guy goes and looks like at 7:00 at night, right? I think the 5:00 guys tickle us, and we want to follow up and see what they look like when the lights are on and it's mano a mano and they're competing out there, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do when they get into town here. We're in the business of trying to win baseball games, so we're looking for guys that, you know, when they go out to work, they're trying to win. They're trying to win baseball games.
Now all those programs have won, like I mentioned, right? And I think the tangible stuff is an easier piece of the puzzle when it comes to identifying guys. Like you've been around a game so long, like you can walk up to a field and you know pretty quickly like who can play and who can't. But what's under the hood is harder to get at. Like what are some of the traits that you think are consistent across those programs? Like obviously you got Northeastern kind of close to the top of the food chain in Division I, you know, producing big leaguers, you know, 40-win seasons, all that good stuff. Tufts has had a ton of success. But my guess is that the character traits that you value probably don't change that much. Tell me a little bit about that and like how you go about figuring out, all right, well, that kid's good enough to play for me, but is that a kid that is going to fit in our program, is going to elevate our program? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, early on in my career, right, I was taught to watch some things that I think I kind of display the character, right? And the first and foremost is we've always viewed it as a relationship, and we're trying to build relationships with our guys. We're trying to have a program aspect to our program, where guys are not just signing up for 4 years of baseball. They're signing on something that they're proud of and moving forward. So, you know, right out of the gate, I think taking ownership of the recruiting career, right, is we're past the high school ages. We're young men to men. So we want to see that early age. And I think today's day and age more than ever with the way it is, we're looking for men. I mean, college baseball has changed greatly, and we're looking for the guys that are going to go out there and take ownerships in their career, right? I think one of the things that's special about Division III is you have a unique balance. I can't be out on the field as much as I was necessarily at the Division I level. So we got to look for guys that are going to take some ownership and want to be driven and want to be successful on that side of it. But, you know, I'll never forget my old man used to tell me right off the get-go, hey, watch how they interact with their families. Watch how they introduce their families on recruit visits. Do they hold the door for people? That's going to tell you a lot about a kid's character, especially at the ages of 16, 17 years old when these kids are coming to visit. I think it's a unique situation to watch a kid come in there kind of big chested, confident, holding the door for mom, showing that kind of respect. Yes, thank you. Looking you in the eye, shaking your hand, showing that presence for a 17 to 18-year-old kid. That's impressive. And I think that's some of the stuff that we try to take a look at. I think the other side is, I learned that in our early ages, you can do a lot of follow-up, call the high school coaches, call the guys that are working with them in the recruiting process, find out how they're doing in stuff outside of baseball, because that can also kind of dictate or show you an inside glimpse on how important baseball is to that person, right? And that's what we try to do. We try to build the relationships. I think we're a little bit different. I have a 35-man roster. I think that's kind of unique at the Division III level. We're a little bit smaller. And when you have a 35-man roster, and we're breaking it down 17, 18 positional guys to 17 to 18 pitchers. You remember what it's like, Andy, when you were at William & Mary, man, you got to hit more than you miss. And so we're spending a lot more time on the front end of recruiting. We're trying to get to know those guys, the ins and outs of them. I think, my time at Northeastern, a huge thing was multi-sport athletes. It's a dying breed. I think, especially up in New England, where it used to be such a stronghold, seeing how those guys compete in other sports. Is the kid the quarterback? Well, that probably shows some leadership skills that you might not see every day if he's a pitcher on a baseball field and he's throwing the ball once, every 5 days. Is he a hockey guy? Is there some kind of toughness? Is he playing a sport where he's getting knocked down and getting up? Is he a guy that just plays sports because he loves to compete year round? Or is he a guy that just wants to go in the cage and lift in the weight room? I think there's different avenues that we try to get creative to paint that whole picture and get a good idea of, hey, who's coming in here? I mean, my goal is to have them for 4 years. So we want to do a good job on the front end, making sure that we're doing that. Just as I expect a recruit to do that with our program and our coaching staff and our players when they're on their visits.
Yeah, the multi-sport athlete thing is always an interesting conversation because I think you can make an argument both ways, but I side with you on there's something about a kid who is picking up another ball or putting on some skates or putting it on a wrestling singlet. And I get that you can make the argument that, if you really want to play college baseball, it's so competitive that you need to work on your baseball game. But I think that sometimes people miss the piece about the competition and like how important that is. And when you get to the next level, whether it's Division I, II, III, junior college, wherever, it's not usually the physical stuff where kids end up not figuring out how good they can be. It's usually the mental side. How do they deal with adversity? Can they sit on the bench for a year and still be productive and be a good member of the team? Because it's hard to play as a freshman no matter where you go. And kids who've had to compete, kids who've played on teams where they might not be the best player, I think it's a skill that you can acquire when you play multiple sports. And I know it's something that I always valued. I know, and Blake did too, and I know you guys do too, is that you want kids to compete. I know you guys known you guys for a long time. Like, guys are competitive as hell, and I don't think that's by accident. Like, you all played multiple sports, and I think it's an interesting conversation to have. But I think there's more coaches out there who value it than they talk about, and that can be a separator sometimes when you find out a kid is a kid plays freaking linebacker, or the kid's a defenseman on the hockey ice. Like, that's something that can move the needle in the recruiting process. It always did for me.
Yeah, no doubt. And just to add on to that, I think a lot of the specialization happens in the sports they're good at, right? And sometimes the quality traits you're looking for in the winter is when you're not the best. How do you show up to work every day? What do you put in? Are you still making that commitment to get to that level, or are you just passing up, man? And I hit it home. Like, we compete. Like, that's what we do for a living. I got 40 games on our schedule, and we're not guaranteed past 40 unless we do a great job competing. So the most important thing that we're looking for in our skill sets is guys that can compete, and guys that compete are usually winners. And that's what we're trying to attract on that side of it. No doubt.
I think it also, and we haven't talked about this on the podcast in a while, but it like the other skill acquisition you can pick up in other sports that translates to playing baseball. Or, I mean, even if it's not baseball and people are listening to you have other kids that play other sports, like playing baseball, you pick up other skills for other sports. And I think that like that's something that goes unnoticed and sometimes undervalued. Like, aside from the whole leadership and the competition piece, which is what everyone is looking for, like, you can't argue with me that if you go play volleyball in the winter, that kid probably isn't pretty explosive on his lower half, which is going to translate into baseball eventually. Or guys like you and I who wrestled, like you're telling me that, having pretty good footwork and doing like that didn't translate to catching and playing infield. Like, yeah, it does. And I think that a lot of people, they look at it from the lens of like, well, what is this doing for me from a baseball standpoint specifically? And we were talking about it on the pre-show, like, and I had this conversation with another coach today. One of the biggest complaints that I had, that he currently has, that you probably have, is the skill set is far better than what it was 5, 6, 7 when you and I became head coaches around the same time, right? Like the skill set, it definitely has gotten better over the last 7 years at the Division III level, but the ability to play the game is something that is lacking. And that's more important at the college level. The ability to have the baseball IQ and the understand, like that's what keeps guys off the field. It's not necessarily the skill set. And you can pick up, to your guys' point, the competition, the other skills in order that's going to get you to be successful that might put you over the edge. Like I know for a fact, man, like you go wrestle, like, hey man, it's one-on-one. Like you have no one else to blame. Like it's not a pitcher where you're like, I made my pitch, but my guys didn't make the play behind me and we lost. Like, no, man, you just got beat. That's on you. No one else. And that's hard to reckon with sometimes. But you learn, like, damn, I don't want to feel like that. Like, I need to keep my ass off so I don't feel like that again. And that carries over into other things. And I think that like that stuff gets so undervalued from, maybe not so much from a recruiting standpoint, but definitely from parents and the high school world of like, why are you doing that? You should just play baseball full time. Like eventually, like, what are you getting out of it from a baseball standpoint in the long run, right? Like if you're just playing games and not really learning much, like you might be better served picking up other skills in other sports. Just food for thought. But, I'm a huge proponent of dual sport athletes. Like I think that it's, I played 3. Like I think that it's something that doesn't necessarily exist as much anymore. But I used to get fired up when guys would email me and be like, "Oh, I play football and I wrestle, or I play hockey and I play volleyball." Like, okay, like might be pretty good. Like might be pretty athletic here. Like let's walk through this door and see where it gets me.
The other thing I'll add to it too is it's been a big week in the Casey household with the 4-year-old. He's been all over the movie Sandlot, and that's the other part, right? Is that side of it. I was lucky that I grew up in the neighborhood with 10, 15 other kids to go along with my 3 brothers. I think no matter what the year was, where we were in the year, we were constantly playing something else. And as you mentioned, I wrestled in high school. The light would be on, you'd have your team watching you, and it's one-on-one versus another guy. I mean, that directly correlates to an at-bat in the game. It's you versus the pitcher. And guess what? Your team's watching and your team depends on the result. So I do think there's plenty of intangibles. I was an 0-11 quarterback. I looked out my ear hole probably every Friday night. But you had to get back up, right? And as much as coach trusted me to run option as like a 7-4 runner, it wasn't going to end well. And it didn't end well, but I look back at that and there's a lot of toughness that I gained from getting knocked on my ass quite frequently and having to get back up because other guys depend on you. And those traits carry over just like you see the traits in sport carry over into the professional world. And that's what ultimately I think makes sports and athletics probably the greatest teacher out there because of those skill sets that you need to acquire to be successful and keep moving up the food chain.
Yeah, that's an interesting piece because I think that the experience of playing college athletics goes well beyond what you do on the field and what you do in a uniform. Like having to show up to early morning lifts, like the commitment you have to a team. There's future employers of these kids who actually value that. Like, and all right, well, this kid played 4 years of a college sport. Like, I bet you that guy knows how to operate in a team. I bet you he knows how to show up on time and meet deadlines and go the extra mile if we need to get some stuff done in a crunch. Like, the things that you learn there, I think they directly translate. And like, especially when you're talking about Division III, vast majority of those kids, professional baseball is not going to be what they do. I think it's something that they have in their tool set when they graduate, is that, hey, I got an edge on everybody because I know how to compete. Like, I know how to be a part of a team. I know how to be accountable. I know how to fail and get back up and figure out a way to do it better the next time. And I don't know if that gets talked about enough from the pure experience of it, because obviously baseball is the focus for most kids as they go through this process, and the back end of it is you'll probably learn more on that baseball field that'll take you forward in the next portion of your life than you will in the classroom.
I know I sure did.
Yeah, absolutely. Things have changed. You alluded to it. We got roster cuts at Division I. You got the transfer portal. How's that impacted you guys? I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. I don't want to steal the conversation, but like, there's an uptick in talent.
Yes.
How's that impacted you guys, and has that changed timing for you in terms of recruiting? Like, what does that look like? And talk a little bit about the impact of some of the rule changes that have come up.
I mean, I think it's had a positive impact on college baseball in general, right? I think you're seeing talent at all levels now. And, we've seen plenty of talent that we've played at the regional level. In the regional final against Endicott, I think, half that team was headed to Division I afterwards. So it's definitely blended them even more than I think they blended. I thought leaving Northeastern, I was going to see a significant talent drop off. We played in the regional my last year there, and my first year down at Johnson Wales, that was kind of taken away. And I think it's continued to kind of murk the waters as the talent has continued to come in. Us personally, we make a living on the high school kids. I think the 4-year development has worked really well for us. I kind of alluded to the roster sizes on us. I think we have had some success in the portal with some guys coming in, filling some gaps for us. We had a big first baseman that year. We made the run to the regional final in Miles Kelly. He was a Division I transfer, came in. Our player of the year last year, our shortstop Riley, was a Division II transfer. But I think the majority of our roster has been high school guys that we've kind of tried to bring in here. We've trusted them. We've done the homework on them, and we've tried them to come and develop. I would say it's unique a little bit in our timing. I think we get guys on the front end or the earlier side, as well as some guys on the late side. I want that kid that's chasing the highest level of baseball I can get, right? I want that baseball guy. I'm willing to sit around for them and allow them to chase it. I know the opportunities the higher level can present some of these players. And I think in today's day and age, recruiting has slowed down for the high school kid a little bit with the Division I level. So it's kind of slowed us down a little bit on that end. But, I think we'll have some guys that are committing in July and August. And then the majority of our class is done by that early action period in early November. And then we kind of wait and hang. For us this year, it's a big year recruiting wise for us. We need to bring in about 14 to 15 guys because we're graduating a big class. And we're sitting here kind of at the 11 period, trying to still figure out, like a lot of schools are right now, what's actually going to be happening next year. What's the end of this spring going to look like? What's the beginning of the fall going to look like? And how's that all going to shake out? Because ultimately we're all trying to put the best baseball team we can out there with the right guys. So it's got to be the right fit for both parties. And I think that can vary timing for a lot of situations, right? I know there's plenty of situations where kids are ready to go and we're not ready to go. We're ready to go and the family's not ready to go. So for us, it's more or less working along their timelines and trying to match our timeline with their timeline to the best we can. And, the players we get at Johnson Wales are the guys that come down and see our program, see what we're all about, and want to be at Johnson Wales. I think that's ultimately the nice thing about Division III is, there isn't any persuasion yet. At least there's the NIL stuff hasn't made it down this way, but a lot of it is picking the school and picking the right situation for the kids And to me, you know, the most important thing is getting out on the field in today's day and age, right? You have to have the opportunity to go out and play. And it's getting tougher and tougher, no doubt.
Are you seeing a little bit of a different level of kid that you have access to compared to when you first started because of the portal and the trickle down effect that I think has probably impacted college baseball? Like,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Some kids that are a little bit more talented than there were like 5, 7, 8 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the physicality, no doubt. I mean, we're a Division III roster that hadn't won a whole lot, and you know, we were quick to turn out a roster that was all, you know, above 6 feet, physical dudes. You know, 185, 195, 205. Our catcher's a 6'2" left-handed hitting catcher who's pretty legit. You know, our 3 guys on the mound are chewing up the velocity and being able to pitch, which is a good bonus. But you know, we joke around it. You know, our times at William and Mary, and I joke around with my brother. Obviously, he was the pitching coach down there, but you know, they used to frustrate us big time because they were the staff that was a little bit different than the other CAA staffs at the time, where it was going to be a lot of 84, 87 pitchability with some touch and velocity. And we're fighting absolute pillow fights either down in Williamsburg or up at Parsons Field, 1-0, 2-0. You know, all of our hitters are coming back to the dugout saying the guy stinks, but they're going 7-8 innings of clean baseball, you know. And I would say when I first took over, that's kind of where Division III was at. And now we're preparing for the same type of arms that we were preparing for 7 years ago. You know what I mean? I'm looking at these guys on the bump and, you know, they're 6'1", 6'2", 88 to 91. You know, we'll open up our season with a good chunk of the top 25, and we're going to see elite arms, you know, for the first 11 games. And it's a big difference maker at this level. But, you know, what used to be far and few is now kind of scattered throughout all over the place. I mean, there's not really any easy scheduling anymore. You're going to run into these stoppers on the mound that have legit stuff. You know what I mean? And it's not just legit stuff either. It's also the ability to pitch, right? And I think that's the difference. When I was a D3 player, you know, I liked running into the guy that was going to be 90, 91 because he was probably going to spray the ball all over the place. Those guys that were 90, 91 weren't really around too often when I played at Tufts. Now they're around a lot and they're commanding the strike zone. You know what I mean? And it's awesome to watch. I mean, it's great quality baseball, especially up in New England. And like I said, you know, it's pretty easy to see that they're meshing because you're seeing a lot of these guys move on to a Division I and get plugged right in and compete for jobs and take some serious innings. And it's just it's awesome for college baseball. It's tough. You got to really work at it now, and you got to love the game to make the improvements where you need to be, and you got to love the gym. I worry about me. 15 years ago, I was competing all the time. I wasn't a big lover of the weight room. I eat like crap. I still eat like crap, and I think it's tougher and tougher now, man. I look at our guys and they're in the gym 4 times a week. They're doing 2 days of speed work and explosive med ball work. They're physically fit men. And, you know, I told my other assistant coaches, I want to remain the smallest guy in the dugout. It's a good problem to have when we have these guys with size and speed and the ability to do what we want to do and try to put the ball over the fence a little bit.
The physicality is it's all over the place now. Like even the guys who are a little bit shorter in stature, like they're strong. And I think that's probably the main area that most high school kids need to focus. It's not on drill work. It's not on, taking, front flips and doing all this stuff that people put on Twitter. We got to go move some weight. We got to go try to run fast. We got to try to get really strong because there's just not, you don't have 155-pound guys running around playing college baseball anymore. Everybody's 180, 185 pounds. And that's kind of the bare minimum at this point. And I think that like you kind of summed it up, like the level of competition is a lot higher, but the physicality is a big driver of that. And, for guys who are listening to this and parents who are listening to this, if you want to move the needle in the recruiting process, regardless of what level you're going to play, best way to do it is get as strong as you can and get as explosive as you can, because it's never going to hurt you.
Right.
You guys get paid to help them get a little bit better on a swing side. Your dad gets paid to help them mechanics wise and teach them how to pitch. But it's the players' responsibility to take care of their body and get themselves ready to go and give you guys a better chance to showcase some of the skills that can be refined when they get to college. But the physicality piece, I think it's the game changer for guys, and it's such a big part of what, 10 years ago, if you were a Division III player, you might not, there's guys that might not even have lifted in the offseason. Now you got guys that's 4 days a week during the season. And I think that's the standard now in order to be competitive. And I think it's awesome because kids are trying to figure out how good they can be as opposed to just going out and playing games. Like they want to excel, like they want to win. And I mean, that's a part of being a part of a good program that's won like you guys have done. But the competitiveness outside of the dugout is something I think it's underestimated at times.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we had the conversation, Papa Case and I, about just the pitchers. A lot of our young guys come in, and a lot of those guys, for them, their initial goal right off the get-go is, hey, we got to get you a little bit more physical and physically mature before we can kind of really talk about it. And I think their freshman year to their sophomore year for our guys is their biggest. And I think a lot of them take their biggest jump into that sophomore year after a year of the college programming. But it's more the physicality side is starting to catch up to the skill set side. And I think that's a lot of the guys that we're getting at the Division III level is those guys that are in that process of the physicality catching up. You know what I mean? And the skill set is there, but once that physicality, catches up, that's what's unlocking that 2 to 3 ticks that takes them from being good to starts to get them into that category of, hey, he might be special. You know what I mean? He might be able to do it and be able to contribute and on that side of it too. But like you said, man, those guys, hey, you remember from your time, we had that guy, Scotty Holes at second base at Northeastern. I mean, that kid was 5'6", 5'7". He could hit the ball out of the park. But when you saw that kid in the weight room, I mean, day one, he was one of our strongest guys, and he didn't take the height size for I can't be as physically gifted as some of these other guys. I mean, it was impressive to watch, and he was built like a little fire hydrant.
Well, you guys got some pretty cool stuff at Johnson Wales from a development perspective. I remember our conversation with nutrition, and like you guys got a pretty unique setup there that has to help expedite that process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of funny that my first day of orientation, I ran into this chef Poiru, and obviously, with the culinary school, I think it's a little bit different than a lot of other institutions. And he was actually starting a major in a class on feeding the high performance athlete, and he was a guy that spent a lot of time with the United States Special Forces, traveling with them and fueling their bodies to be able to perform at the highest level. And he was a resource that we no doubt used, and now it's kind of branched off for a lot of other athletic teams. But, to be able to sit there at the end of the fall, meet with our players and say, hey, this is what we need to work on. Not just having it like leave at that, but being able to have that follow up and say, hey, if you're a guy where 10 to 15 pounds of good weight is something that is attainable in 2 to 3 months, to have that resource to bring them over to and could say, hey, man, this is how you can do it in the dining hall, or this is how you can do it at Aldi's or Whole Foods, and make it realistic for a college kid. I mean, that's a big separator, right? And I think there's a lot of us. I know that was me in my career is, a lot of plateaus came because I didn't do the other side outside the weight room real well. What I ate, how I recovered, that stuff wasn't as big. I was the guy that went and lifted and then ordered a calzone on the way home. And it was just like, hey, this isn't really going anywhere, man. You're not having a lot of success, right? And I think my years with Coach Glavin, being able to see that, we had an awesome strength coach up there in Jay Aguiar. He actually does still some of the stuff for us because he was tremendous. But watching those guys being able to talk to scouts saying, hey, 10, 15 pounds could be a big difference maker for this kid, or it could be a difference in what he's signing for. And being able to see that happen in a month or 2 month span as they're preparing for the season, the biggest part of that picture was the nutritional side of it. How was he fueling that body to be able to perform at the highest level, and having a special culinary program attached to our university. That was something our guys have tapped into, and some of our guys love it. Some other guys shy away from it. I think that's all about taking ownership in your career and kind of figuring it out. But it has paid off huge benefits for a lot of our guys.
Yeah, I want to get on campus and check that out. It sounded like a pretty cool setup that you guys got. We were talking about that out at the Boston Open. We were watching some kids play, but the these kids have so much information at their fingertips
No doubt.
with social media. You got YouTube, which probably falls under that window, but they have so much access to so much good stuff, and I think that kids need to take advantage of it ahead of time, right? So that when they get to school, when they get to someone like you, they're already comfortable in the weight room. They got a pretty good idea of kind of how they should eat and what they should be doing. But taking advantage of that stuff, to your point, like taking ownership of it, like being accountable to making some of those adjustments in your diet, and it goes such a long way. And it was never talked about when we played, right? Like in the early 2000s, it just wasn't, there's no emphasis on it. It was come in, try to move as much weight as you can, and go take a nap or go to the dining hall and stuff your face with whatever. But it wasn't nearly as scientific or thought out as it can be now, where you can really move the needle in a 2-month window by just paying attention to a few specific things, in addition to doing the hard part, which is getting in there and sweating and pushing weight and doing that kind of stuff. But it's cool that your guys have access to that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I just even know this from my wife showing me an app the other day, because I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight before opening day. The ease now, like you said, the access to information. But I mean, there's apps out there now that can keep track of a lot of stuff, of calorie intake, what you're trying to do, setting goals and stuff like that you can fully take advantage of. And that is a huge separator. I mean, we keep saying it, but ownership in your career is a huge separator. Not needing someone to bring you to the water to teach you how to drink it, but you're just going out there and doing it. It is a big separator. It's the same separator. I mean, that's no difference than when a guy goes 0 for 4. Do you put the work in the off hours to get the cage work so you're ready for the next day? Or do you just go home and kind of accept it and just keep doing it a couple days in a row? And that's just what it is, right? And we want that guy that takes that ownership of his career. I've always viewed coaching as trying to help a young kid get to a place he can't get to by himself, but that kid's got to first believe he can get to that place. You know what I mean? And we're there to motivate him on the days we need to motivate him. We're there to check him and bring him back to reality on those days we need to check him and bring him back to reality. But I think we're all in it together to try to get to that place that we can't get to alone, you know?
Well, there was even when we played, like no one talked about sleep. You know what I mean? Like no one talked about like how important sleep is for athletes. Like, I mean, let's face it, there were a handful of nights where like you maybe had one too many and stayed out a little bit later past midnight than you should have, and then tried to roll it out the next day for practice or whatever. Like that was just like, I don't want to say it was accepted, but like no one was like, hey, you should probably, tone it down a little bit. Maybe go to bed at 11 instead of 3. Like, now it's so much more, there's so much more information, but it's actually talked about like, hey, by the way, like if you guys really want to put on weight and you want to be able to be more physical and really want to find success, like you have to actually let your body recover. And, and I think you have to change some of the things you might do from a coaching standpoint for that too. Like I've talked about this on here before where, at RPI, we would have test weeks where guys would just get buried. Like they're not sleeping. They're studying for 5 tests during the week. And, it was no accident. Like we'd schedule a midweek game and like, we'd get boat raced like 14-2. And I'm like, we're flat. There's no energy. What's going on? It's like, oh, we're averaging 3 hours a night on sleep while also trying to cram for these tests. So we got to the point where I was like, I need to know when test weeks are so I can kind of schedule around it. If we have games or if we have practice, like I'll back off a little bit so that we're not out here inner squatting or going and playing Middlebury on a Wednesday. Not that you don't want to play Middlebury, but like that's a 3.5 hour drive. Like,
yeah,
maybe not do that. Maybe schedule a home game if we got to play that way, whatever it might be. And I think like, you have to be smart about it as a coach too, but it's also like, it's so much more talked about and, prevalent for guys to be able to, like, if you're going to beat the drum that you have to be physical, like you got to do the other stuff too. And that's, that's sleep, that's nutrition, that's hydrating, that's the whole like, I mean, no one talked about drinking water when we were in college. The only time we talked about it was like, we're going to play LSU in a regional and it's going to be like 92 degrees with 100% humidity. So like, let's make sure we drink enough water. And we still didn't. Pat Feeney locked up. He looked like a sniper got him from the top of the press box running off the field. Andy looked at him and just kept on running. It was unbelievable. But, like my point though is like all of this stuff, like we didn't, not that it's new, but like it's so much more talked about and accessible for kids that like it does make conversations easier with kids sometimes where it's like, hey man, like you're not doing what you need to do off the field to get on the field. Like it's not really a skill set standpoint. Like you're just not physical enough. Like swing's good, but you can't drive the baseball. Or your mechanics are clean, but hey man, you can only move the ball so much when you weigh 160 pounds. Like throw on 15, 20 pounds of good weight, like you're probably going to see your velo tick up to the point where you're a lot more competitive on the mound for us. And that's, it's the lowest hanging fruit, I think, for a lot of younger players. Like just go get physical, if nothing else, and that's, I think it also goes back to like when you're recruiting, you're looking at guys like, everyone like, you want to look good in a uniform, blah, 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 blah. But like, it's what's in that uniform too. Like your uniform can look great and you can have your TV tape and your Evo shields and your oven mitts. But like, if you're super slight and look like you're going to break on a 92-mile-an-hour fastball that hits you in the back, like you got to do a lot of special stuff for people to be like, hey, I'm going to take a chance on this kid. Like go get physical and fill that uniform out. And I guarantee you more people will start beating down that door.
Yeah, I agree. I also say, I think it's just the commitment and the discipline it takes to get there, right? It's, if you're a guy that's looking for confidence, man, that's your edge. That's your edge. When you make a commitment like that and you do it over a length of time, you can't tell me you're not going to come out more confident in the grand scheme of things, right? And I think ultimately in a game of failure, we're all looking for that confidence in that separator. And you're starting to get up there, and we've all talked about the skill sets being where they're at. What are those difference makers? Where is that edge you're getting that's going to make you more confident than the other guy? Because both you guys can be able to handle the glove flips, the glove agilities, all that kind of stuff. But I do see that it's a lot easier when those guys are putting that in. They just feel different, man. They look different. They feel different. I know now on the backside of it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I had no problem taking the shirt off at the beach. This shirt don't come off the beach anymore. It stays on. I say it's for my Irish skin, but in reality, it's I'm not showing my handles no more, so.
I let it rip.
Dad bods were in for a while.
My white trashness, I love when I get to the beach.
But
no, I think it's important because you see, like you talk about the jump between freshman and sophomore year, like those kids that make that jump, especially physically, like those kids, you see a far bigger jump out of. Like everyone's going to make a jump after going through a year of college baseball, but the guys that do get super physical, like they do have a lot more confidence. They're a lot more confident in what it is that they're doing. They miss pitches and they're like, I know what I did there. Like, whereas the year before, like they get like that barrel gets beat and like, it's like you're watching, like you can, the famous, like you can watch a bird land on that barrel and like they're swinging underwater. They're getting beat on fastballs where the barrel's just getting pushed back. And all of a sudden, like there's something there. And like, you see that confidence start to drive and really start to build. And like those are the guys that you can really start to rely on. Like we had a guy, Joey Saya, who was a freshman in 2020, and I think he listed himself at 175. Like he would be lucky if he was 175. But by the time he graduated, like he was pushing 200 and like looked great in a uniform, was super physical, could drive the ball out of the yard, and like watching his trajectory and what he was able to do at like personally and the confidence he had in what he was doing. And a lot of it just stemmed from being in the weight room. It wasn't a skill set standpoint. It was just the more physical he got, he was able to be better because of his skill set. And I think you're right. Like one of the things, and it doesn't matter what level of college baseball you're at, like it's all relative to the level, but we're still talking about, what is it? 8% that are going to go play Division 1, 2, and 3 baseball. Like, you're a pretty good baseball player if you're playing college baseball. And if you want to be really good, there are like the margins to be really good are razor thin. Like what do you need to do in order to separate yourself, like you said, to get that edge on whatever it is you're doing. And it is going to be the weight room. It's going to be sleep. It's going to be hydration. It's going to be sharpening your skill set and doing those types of things. But it is that discipline in order to, like, if you want to get on the field at the college level, and if you're listening to this as a high school kid, like, it's all of those things combined. It's not just, hey, I got to get really good at hitting in the cage, because I got a newsflash for you. Like, this game does not happen in a cage. Like, there's another dude on the rubber who's looking to get you out. He doesn't tell you what pitch is coming. Like, you have to actually hit and find success when the lights are on. And those are the things that can be the separator for you. Like, you know, it broke me when we jacked the hack attack up and guys would be like, it moves a little bit. Like, yo, when we go play Union, like, we don't look at the pitcher and be like, hey, if you could throw it right here on the outer third of the plate at, like, you know, mid thigh high, I'll fight. Like, I get the barrel to it. Like, I'll find some success there. Like, come on. We're trying to challenge ourselves to compete here. Like, get over the fact that the machine's moving a little bit. Like, oh God, that broke me. After year one, they stopped complaining.
And a true story. We had our number 2. He's had some success, and I think he's a guy that, you know, he struggles with confidence at times, and he's heading into his senior year. And most kids heading into their senior year, he's got some high expectations. And, you know, I remember his end of fall meeting vividly, and same kind of thing, a little inconsistent when things are great. He was awesome. When he struggled a little bit, he struggled. And our pitching coach talked to him about finding an edge, and he kept it very simple. He said, you know, just do something that most of your teammates won't do. He goes, I'm going to put a dare on you. And I think if you come out and you make a commitment to this over the 2 months, you're going to be a different kid. And basically he told him to get up at, you know, 5 days a week, 5 a.m. and just go run a mile. And the kid physically is in shape. He could run more than a mile a day. That wasn't it. But it was the challenge and the discipline that kid had to learn to get up every day. And being a school in New England and talking about running in the months of November and December, there's a lot of opportunities for you to tell yourself, no, not go today, or get back under, hit the snooze button. And the kid made a commitment in day one of his bullpens. He was lighting up the radar gun. His stuff was different. And it wasn't because he made great strides. It was because the belief in himself went through the roof. And I think that goes back to our original conversation on the lessons you learn outside of the game that you can bring into the game when you make these type of commitments, right? I love two-way guys because it's not, 2-sport athletes, 3-sport athletes, because it's not easy. Now, those guys are still finding time to lift and do what they need to do when they're in football or they're in basketball. They're making that kind of commitment, and that's ultimately what makes them special. And I think that's why you don't see it as much, because it's hard to go out and practice football, 5 days a week and get whacked, and then still find time to get in the cages and serve as your team's 3-hitter and get your swings in, or be able to get in the weight room and do what you want to do. But as we've talked about, the game in college has gotten a lot harder, and it's getting more challenged. And you need to be the guy that embraces those type of challenges, because those are the invaluable lessons that are what going to make you successful. I'm excited as hell to see this kid pitch this year because of the belief he all of a sudden has. And I'm more kicking myself in the butt that we didn't have him running at 5 a.m. his freshman year, because he might have been really, really special. But for him to have that self-discovery and be able to win those battles, that's what happens. You go out there, you make a great pitch. It's easy. The kid hits it. It's easy to be like, all right, man, today's not my day. But you don't have that opportunity. You got to come back and make that next pitch and believe in that next pitch. Or when you're gone 0 for 3, your biggest at bat might come in the 8th inning with a chance to win it. If you're carrying that baggage with you up to that at bat, you're not gonna put yourself in the best position to have success in.
You pulled on some stuff here, and we had Coach Kaz from Air Force on a couple weeks ago. And you're saying a lot of similar things. And I think you've been around this game so long. You're not talking about wins and losses. Like, you're talking about process. You're talking about impacting kids. You're talking about these kids popping out the other end of your program better for it. Like, that kid, regardless of his performance this year, because he accepted that challenge, like he'll be better for that when he's 30 years old and is a dad. Like, talk a little bit about, we have a lot of coaches who listen to this, and high school coaches, college coaches. And I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the wins and losses, right? Because it's ultimately what we get judged by. And like, we all want to win, right? You're trying to win a championship every year. But the long-term goal is so much deeper than that, right? And I know that's a big part of why you do what you do. I don't even know if you need to say anything, but I just want to bring that out as like a thing that I think that gets lost sometimes, is that it is so ultra competitive, and wins and losses are what matters. And, we go through this 40 game season or 56 game season, and you're trying to accumulate as many W's as you can. But as a coach, when you reflect on it, I don't think about the wins and losses at William and Mary. I think about the kids calling me at 7:30 in the morning saying, "Hey, my 9 a.m. class got canceled. Can I come get some swings in?" And like the impact you can have on those kids long term. I think it's a hard thing to quantify, but I think it's one of the coolest things you do as a college coach.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, just like you said, I mean, last week during our team meeting, I had a former guy from Northeastern who's in the Yankees program. And it was interesting enough. He teed it up just like that, just talking about being in love with the process of it. And, he had obviously the ability to do spring training with some really good Yankee ball players and true professionals and some of the best in the game. And one of our guys asked him, what's the difference between the great ones that you've noticed? And he just said, they're obsessed with living pitch by pitch. And he goes, that's my number one goal this year. He's like, too many times that you can get caught up in the emotions of it, or all of a sudden you just turn a bat at bat into a month long, and you realize the great ones never do that. They have the ability to separate and be in the present moment to deliver the most competitive moment they can, pitch by pitch, and they dumb it down. But you're 100% right. I mean, I learned from guys that had always done it, that I feel like that's really the only way I know how to do it. The three guys I work for, they've always invested in the kid. I think they all signed up for coaching, not for wins and losses, but to help young kids get to where they want to get to in life. And we got a pretty cool tool in the game of baseball to be able to do that with these kids. And I think if you do it the right way, as you see with many other programs, the wins and losses take care of themselves. It is a byproduct of doing the right things consistently over a long period of time. You know what I mean? And that belief in that stubbornness, not to give in or take the shortcut, but to put the work in and do it the hard way, because a lot of times the hard way is the right way. That's what ultimately brings sustainable results, which I think is what you look at ultimately when you're talking about a winning program or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'll give a quick story back on the like doing hard things. Wickle like this one. We used to run a mile test at William and Mary. And every year somebody you'd overhear like, why the F are we doing this? Like, we don't run a mile. We're baseball players. And finally it built up, and some guy said something. I pulled him aside and I said, hey, you understand this isn't about the mile, right? And he didn't grasp it right away. It's like, this isn't about the mile. It's about seeing who's willing to push themselves for 6 minutes. And like, who's going to show up at 6:30 in the morning and it's cold, and who's just going to gut it out for 4 laps on the track. Like, this has nothing to do with time. It has nothing to do with conditioning. It's just, let's see who's really going to compete. Like, and we had guys that loved it, thought it was the coolest thing. We had one guy, Owen Soccer, he's one of the favorite guys I ever coached. He came around the third lap, the third turn on the 4th lap, threw up and never broke stride and made the time. And it was like, those are the moments where like, that's when you know, like, I got the right kid. Like, that kid's willing to push himself to the edge. And it's a little bit different than the 5 a.m. story, but I think that some of the stuff that you do within a program is not necessarily about it being a baseball thing. It's about a toughness thing, a compete thing, being accountable to your teammates, like little stuff like showing up on time. Like, that stuff goes such a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I think any good program you're going to see some standards, right? I mean, that's a standard. Yeah, yeah. For you to do this, we want you to make that kind of commitment to each other to push yourself through that mentally. And you know, I know that 6 minute mile very well. I knew I had to do it back in my glory days, and I wasn't the best at it either. And I was one of those guys that questioned it a lot of times. Is, hey man, when I hit these doubles and I can walk into second base, you know, why do I got to run a mile in 6 minutes? You know, but seeing the flip side of it and being a part of that program, as well as taking that testing to the programs I've got to, it's 100% what you said, right? Is it isn't actually about the 6 minute mile. It's about that commitment and that ability to fight for others instead of yourselves all the time. You know what I mean? And I think we all are kind of more growing up in selfish type generations that we play a team sport. You got to put the other guys ahead of you in a lot of circumstances in this game, and your success is genuinely tied into your teammates' success. Ultimately, if they're not having success, you're not going to get to success. You know, I used to love it. The 2008 Celtics used to use the word Ubuntu, which was an African term for basically saying, you know, your success is my success, and that was kind of their championship rally around that season. And you're talking about a team that brought three superstars together for the first time, and KG sacrificing some points in the hoop to be the best defensive guy. But he knew being the best defensive guy that year was going to give him an opportunity for him, Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, who were two great scorers, to win a championship, right? And I think that's all the stuff that we're talking about when we're trying to recruit those guys, is those kind of guys, those type of guys that just don't understand. It's part of the job, man. It's part of being a baseball player. It comes with the gig. You know what I mean? It's a certain expectation. But like I said, and go back to, I mean, I think any program you go to, those standards are there. You know, I've worked for three great coaches, and they all had similar standards. You know, our guys showed up on time. They looked appropriate. They went to class. They sat in the front of class. They did things that weren't necessarily the easiest things for 17 to 22-year-old kids to do. I think most young males are totally happy hiding in the back of a college class and just being in disguise and going through the motions of it, right? But when you challenge your guys to say, hey, this is how we do things, it starts to take a special group to live in that locker room. And when you have a special group in that locker room, you start to unlock some stuff that you could do out on the field. You know what I mean? Because it's not all cupcake and roses over a 40-game schedule that's, you know, 3 to 4 months. I mean, we're starting training in early January, and we're hoping to keep this thing rolling all the way through May. I mean, that's a significant amount of time with each other, that you do want to surround yourself with some special guys if you're ever going to get there.
The process of getting to college can be so individualized that it can be a little bit of a culture shock when you get there and you realize that you're a part of something a lot bigger than yourself. Like, it's not just about having 9 really good hitters. Obviously that helps, but you need guys who can function within an offense, who can do team related stuff. And in high school, I think that a lot of times you're driven by 1 or 2 really good arms, 1 or 2 really good bats. And if those guys are good on that given day, you usually end up winning games. Right. But when you get to college, you need to function as a part of a much larger unit. You have roles. There's no bullpens in high school. If you go to the bullpen in high school, it's just because your starter wasn't good enough. But like, you get to college, you got guys who, they're bridge guys, they're long relief guys, they're leverage inning guys, they're matchup guys. You get platoon guys positionally. And like, how do you figure out how you fit within a roster? Well, if they're throwing a lefty and you're a right-handed hitting outfielder, like, that might be your opportunity to get in the lineup. And that just happens to be your role that year. And like, being able to grasp onto that. And I think it can be a transition for guys when they get to college, that you are a part of something significantly bigger than yourself. And you need to be able to function within not only the rules, but like, you need to be able to adopt to being a really good teammate first and foremost, and then take advantage of the opportunities that are given to you when you get them. But that can be hard for guys, because everybody who goes to college, you're used to being in the 3-hole. Well, all of a sudden, you might not even be starting, or you might be the 9-hole guy. And you just got to kind of embrace where you're at and find a way to keep chipping away to get a bigger role. You know, if you're that matchup lefty, come and be really good at that. And then I promise you, if you're really good at that, they'll probably give you a little bit more to eat. Maybe now you're going to get 6 outs. Maybe you're going to get some righties, prove yourself that you're good. Maybe you start getting some more leverage spots. That's a big transition for kids. And I think it can be tough sometimes. I think leadership's a big part of that. It helps guys fit in, right? When you got that strong locker room and they can kind of sort it out themselves. I've always found that if you have that, like, a lot of that stuff takes care of itself.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we've worked on probably the last 2 years. It's a big focus of ours. Obviously, when we took over, it was a lot of coach-led stuff at the beginning, right? On how we kind of wanted to set the tone and do things. But I would say we're in the transition period of trying to turn ourselves from a good ball club to a great ball club. And I think the great ball clubs, like you said, a lot of that stuff happens within the locker room. The locker room kind of policed itself. It decides the standards of the group and what's going to live on that. And it allows the coaches to go out there, get ready for practice and coach them up and not have to deal with the distractions on that side of it. But, that's the period we're in. I mean, we spend a lot of time every Friday morning. We have team meetings all preseason, kind of preaching, team building stuff, but a lot of leadership stuff to get the understanding of our group that if it comes organically out of this locker room, man, and we can go out and coach, I mean, that's going to be the best versions of ourselves. You guys are the workers. You guys are the absolute workers, and you guys are doing it day in and day out. You guys are also charged of the quality control. What's the product look like when someone's coming to watch it for their first time? What are they going to see? We're in a game that's built around a law of averages. So every day it does matter for us, right? The 4 for 4 is a great day. And then the 0 for 4, well, you're back to being a 500 guy there on that side of it, which is still awesome. But another 0 for 4 day, now we're down to 250, right? So it's a game of consistency, and the part we stress with our guys is a lot of decisions we're making as coaches, it isn't necessarily on the ceiling. It's what's the floor. When you're not good, what's that look like? And a lot of that everyday lineup stuff is decided on the actual floor. I can't predict that you're going to come in here and have a great day and go 4 for 4. But I can have a good idea if your ceiling and your floor are pretty close, man, on what we're going to get on a consistent basis, right? Those guys that the floor and the ceiling are wide apart are really the tough guys to play. I call those the angels in the outfield guys. I look to see if the angels are swatting their wings behind them. And then I know, hey, man, this is the day we can play this guy. He's feeling great, right? But unfortunately, I don't have that ability yet. And, so a lot of our decisions over the 6-week period of preseason on who's going to be, in the opening day lineup on day one is, hey, when they're not going well, what's that look like? Is that still 4 competitive at bats? Is it great defense? Is he fighting and pounding the zone and finding a way to scratch us to the 6th inning? Or is he shutting it down and giving us 2 innings and he's had 2 at bats? It's only going to get worse and worse, right? So I think that's a big focus that we try to preach to our guys, especially is, what's your floor look like on a day-to-day basis? We play a game that's built around consistency. So it is important on how you show up every day.
I think it's a great way to put it. I think the other thing too, like the player-led stuff and it's huge. And you're at an advantage than most other people. Like I was, like you got to coach, or your father's a legend, but you also have him as an assistant who, I had Carl Steffen who won, damn near close to 1,000 games at RPI and went to World Series and was really good. Like those guys forget more than we know about baseball. Like, we would talk about this stuff all the time. He was like, you can talk to your blue in the face. Like it means so much more when players are the ones that hold other guys accountable. And when you have those teams, it's going to be a struggle where like you have to teach those guys to do it. But when you turn that corner, you're like, damn, we're going to be pretty good here because I don't have to police some of this stuff. I don't have to worry about what's coming out of the dugout or, what guys are doing. And like, they hold people to the, there's a level of expectation in this program and they hold guys to that line. And you're like, okay, I don't have to worry about some of this stuff anymore. I can actually go coach and worry about stuff that I need to do to actually improve these guys from a baseball standpoint instead of just the little things that, they need to police themselves on. And I think having, a guy like your dad and being around guys like Carl and, I'd coached Rossi at Siena for, I was there when he was a year like 42. and then he went another 15 years. You know, so like you have those guys to lean on, and like like that's always it's something that they always talk about, and it's like, all right, if these guys continually talk about this stuff, like it's got to be true. Like it hasn't changed in the 70 years that they've been around this game. Like it hasn't changed. Like that it's true. And I think that it's, you know, having someone like your dad there, you know, I know it was a huge benefit for me, but that's got to be awesome for you. Like not only coaching with them, but, you know, being able to be like, hey, what do you think about this? You've seen more games than I've ever seen in my entire life. So hit me with it.
I always compare it to like when the Patriots made the foolish decision to let Tom Brady walk and Tampa swooped in. As soon as, you know, Tufts let that guy retire, I was quick to pull up the phone and let him know how sunny the beaches were in Providence. And we could get him a nice little window, hotel down there. No, it's unbelievable. It's been an unbelievable resource for us. But I think the biggest thing is obviously being his son and watching it from an outside is his commitment to the players. And he's been one of the greatest at that. He still talks to those guys. He still sends them gifts when they have a kid, when their kid has a kid, you know, they're getting something from them. It's what's ultimately showed me, I think, the most important part, and Andy alluded it to early, right, is that relationship side. That's ultimately, as a coach, one unlocks that final bit of trust where you can finally help take that player to get to. You don't need to tell him what he wants to hear anymore. He's accepting of what he needs to hear because he trusts you as a person, and you see him more than just a baseball player. He feels like he can come and have that conversation if he's having a tough time in family life, if he needs some advice getting a job. Well, that kid's also going to be more open into making an adjustment and allow you to be his set of eyes when he's going through a tough period, right? And I think that is what I hold dearest that I learned from him. I mean, I grew up with those guys, those guys that played for my dad. My kids now grow up with my players because they're a special group, because they have to do special things to be a part of the program, right? And I want my kids to see that. I love it when my kids come back and I'm playing wiffle ball with them, and my 4-year-old's calling, you know, himself our 4-hitter. You know, I think it's awesome, but it just shows you how much the eyes can be on you when you do something, and it reminds our guys, you know what I mean, that they're playing for something. You know, there's people watching. It's, you know, there's names and numbers that go next to it, and you want to do it. And I think that standard carries throughout everywhere you go in life, right? It's how you show up to work when the eyes are on you or they're not. I think there's always someone watching you, but it's special. And we try to study the special ones, man. I try to tell our guys to go find someone that's successful. That's a CEO, CFO. Go look at what they do in the mornings. Go look at the routines they have. Go read a book about Kobe. Go read a book about Tom Brady. Look how obsessed they are with the process of it. Look at the stuff that they do and the structure and discipline that they put in their life. And no kidding, they walk around like they can beat anyone, and they're the best of the best. I mean, the story of Kobe Bryant and Team USA out in Vegas, you know, the whole team's coming back, and he's taking the elevator to the floor, bottom floor, to go to the gym at 5 a.m. And the team sees him, and they're like, well, that's what makes Kobe Kobe. And then the next day on the elevator at 5 a.m., it's Kobe and LeBron James. And it has a contagious effect. And that's what we stress with having it in the locker room. When it's organically done in the locker room, man, it has a contagious effect. You know, like there's those days where you get blocked out as a coach, and you're probably very deserving to get blocked out as a coach. But when you have those guys in the locker room that are walking stride for stride with you, man, it's special. It truly is. I'm a big Kobe. Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't have been a podcast with you if we didn't at least reference the Celtics, the Patriots. I'll give you an opportunity if you want to go Bruins and Red Sox too before we close out.
Yeah, I'm a little excited for the Sox. We've started to spend a little bit of money. I think we're like 14th in the payroll. You know, ticket prices are still sky high, so I won't be fully on board with them. And the Bees are going through a tough one right now, so we're going to keep them on the ice.
All right. We don't want to take up too much of your time. You've already given us a lot tonight. So our last question is always, what advice would you give families going through this process right now from a recruiting standpoint?
I would say, do your homework, do your research. I think there's a lot of awesome opportunities out there in today's day and age, and I think it's, recruiting has gotten a heck of a lot different. You can't tie yourself to certain levels anymore. There's some unbelievable opportunities, and there's a lot of movement happening. But build relationships through the process. I think just like anywhere in life, relationships are important. They can also help you. But there's a lot of information on universities, on baseball programs in today's social media world, as well as what's on the internet. Get out early, do some visits, do some research on your own. You can set your timeline. I think so many players wait for their timeline to begin with a coach's phone call. But you can start to get it going early on in the process by starting to figure out, hey, am I a kid that wants to go to school in the city? Am I a kid that wants to go to school in the sticks? What am I looking for from an academic standpoint? I think ultimately the decision's got to help you in two ways. It's got to help you from a baseball standpoint, getting from point A to point B. But it's also going to help you out from a professional standpoint. It's got to be able to do that. It's an investment in your career. It's what college is, right? It's an investment in yourself. And I think just like anything else, when you're making a big investment, you got to do some research, and you got to do some research on your own. You got to do some investment. You got to use a lot of the resources that are out there in this day and age, and find the ones you can trust, right? And I think that comes down with doing your own research and being able to accomplish what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. But there's a lot of great coaches out there at a lot of great places. And I think, sometimes people can put their blinders on and not realize the special opportunities that can happen. And to me, a big part of the development process is being able to go out there and see what it looks like when the lights are on, right? And, playing time is a big thing that I try to stress, is that's the difference now. I think when you see the kids that are playing at the higher level, or the kids that are moving on from Division III to go play on the higher level, coaches are looking for game-ready players more than ever. And game-ready players are because they're playing in games and they're getting that experience. They're not just taking BP and watching 9 innings of baseball, but they're going out there and they're putting up numbers. And that's ultimately what college coaches are. I think winning is very important, and that kind of ties in with it. So doing your own research, being able to go out there and figure out what you want is very important, and being able to kind of weigh it all in. But, enjoy the process. I think it could be tough at times, but control the stuff you can control, right? We talked about it all night. Get in the weight room, make sure that you're investing that money and becoming more physically gifted, becoming a better baseball player. And I think today's day and age, what's special is exposure is a heck of a lot easier than it used to be when we played. I played 20 games in the spring. I played 20 games in the same state in the summertime. That's what we had. I think I played largely in front of colleges and coaches in New England. I'm not sure I ever got exposed outside the region. It just didn't happen. And I think today's schedule and everything like that presents those unique opportunities for kids to open up doors all over the place. And, obviously what you do in the classroom is very important. I can't say it enough. I know for our level, we don't have athletic scholarship, but it gives opportunity for some of these places to give you a lot of academic scholarship, which sometimes can be better than what you might be getting at a higher level athletic scholarship wise. So I think it's never going to close any doors. And I think anything you look at that can keep doors open, that's what I would invest in during those years is those things that are going to continue to help you keep a wide variety of stuff. But it's been awesome to be on this podcast, man. I can't thank you two guys enough. There's not a better way to spend a nice Monday night leading up to game week. It's been it's a big week for us, and you guys got us kicked off pretty good. So I'm excited.
Hell yeah, man. We were fired up to have you on. I was fired up to see you this summer. Hopefully we'll see you up at the Boston Open again, but good to get you on. Appreciate your time, man. Obviously best of luck. Tell the old man I said hello. I learned so much just from sitting next to that guy at Top 96 at Tufts, running to get sandwiches with Bob Kinney. Like I have such fond memories of getting to know him, and then obviously the relationship with you and Brian. Like, you guys are a special group, and obviously we're rooting for you guys, and I know you got a heck of a slate here coming up. So obviously, best of luck this opening weekend, and hopefully we'll see that name called for the NCAA tournament.
I appreciate it, man. And like you just alluded to, I think the coolest byproduct of this game of baseball is the relationships you build around it, man. And I can't thank you guys enough. This is a special opportunity for our group to be able to get out here and talk in front of your audience. And if there's anything we can ever do to help you guys out in the future, you know my cell phone. Give me a holler.
Yeah, man. You're the best. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Tune in next week. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.